Jorge, y después tendremos las presentaciones de los equipos. Es muy interesante el concurso que desarrollaron en la Agencia Espacial Mexicana, los vamos a poder ver. Y ya para terminar tendremos una mesa panel con alumnos nuestros y las personas de los concursos. Entonces, pues básicamente gracias a todos por venir, gracias a los miembros del jurado que están donando su tiempo para mejorar la educación de los jóvenes. Y bueno, básicamente lo que les quería comentar es que en la Universidad Panamericana el campo aeroespacial ha tomado relevancia en los últimos años. Probablemente saben, pasen a su casa, probablemente conocen el proyecto de Cyber Design, que lleva ya 4 años en la Universidad Panamericana, y conservamos los primeros 10 lugares. Están en los primeros 10 lugares mundiales de hace 4 años en la categoría avanzada. Y últimamente, está hablando del último año hacia acá, hemos estado también desarrollando un proyecto de microsatélites con MIT, de manera que esto es parte un poquito de los esfuerzos que estamos haciendo por avanzar en el campo aeroespacial. Les cuento un poco rápidamente lo que es nuestro proyecto. Nuestro proyecto vamos a mandar un microsatélite durante los próximos años que ayuda a rastrear la basura espacial, midiendo la densidad de la atmósfera. Entonces esto lo estamos haciendo con el profesor Pablo Lozano de MIT. Vamos a visitar de nuevo en el próximo verano a MIT para tener una sesión de trabajo con ellos. Y pues bueno, el área aeroespacial incluye 2 vertientes importantes, la aeronáutica y la espacial. Y sucede que la parte de aeronáutica, de hecho la industria espacial ha crecido mucho en México los últimos 5 o 6 años. Pues a lo mejor ustedes tienen cifras más adecuadas. Pero por eso es que organizamos este evento y decidimos traerlo aquí. Y pues bueno, sin más, les presento a Blanca Rebollar, que representa a la Agencia Espacial Mexicana. Y pues bueno, gracias.
Muchas gracias, Carlos. ¿Qué tal?
Pequeño anuncio técnico para la gente de la Facultad de Ingeniería de la UP. Hay una hoja de registro que tiene un formato de la Agencia Espacial Mexicana. Entonces, por favor, si le estamos validando una visita de escuela práctica básica, anótense en esa hoja de registro, que no se les olvide, pongan su ID en la primera columna que dice ID UP. Y a las 7 van a pasar los becarios también a tomar el registro a la salida. Solo para la gente de la Facultad de Ingeniería de la UP, que le estamos validando una escuela práctica básica, que es relativamente un conjunto que tiene. Que no se les olvide registrarse en estas hojas al inicio y al final. Esas hojas, ¿no? Entonces, si no están, las vamos a pasar, pues, pero no se les olvide. Gracias.
Sí, muchísimas gracias. Bueno, ¿qué tal? Buenas tardes a todos. Me permito presentarme, soy Blanca Rebollar, directora de formación de capital humano especializado en el campo espacial. Y antes de proseguir, y bueno, agradezco muchísimo a la Universidad Panamericana que accedió a ser sede de este evento. Ahorita les voy a platicar en qué consiste. Quisiera conocerlos un poco más, entonces, por favor levanten la mano aquellos que que están en estudios de licenciatura. Tenemos jóvenes de bachillerato. Ok, está muy bien. ¿Profesores? Bueno, profesores, sí. Muchas gracias. Bueno, pues les voy a platicar rápidamente qué es Misiones Espaciales México. Concebimos Misiones Espaciales México como un evento que nos permitiera vincular a la academia con la industria y con el gobierno. ¿Y de qué manera? Generando retos que sean reales, que tenga cualquiera de ellos, y que los jóvenes como ustedes puedan dar ideas de cómo pueden resolverse. En esta ocasión estamos haciendo totalmente diferente porque decidimos hacerlo en un reto muy importante, que es el hombre va a llegar a Marte. O sea, hay planes reales de que el hombre llegue a Marte. Ahorita va a haber una conferencia de NASA donde les van a platicar un poquito más a detalle. Y ahí pues tenemos una serie de retos, no solamente para llegar a Marte, sino cómo se va a habitar. Entonces, sacamos en este concurso 4 retos. Los retos técnicos, los retos de negocios, los retos biomédicos y los retos, ¿cuál me falta?
Legales.
Y los retos legales. Y perdón, se me olvida siempre la parte legal. Y bueno, la verdad es que en esta ocasión en el reto legal solamente tuvimos un equipo participante, que es la mala noticia. La buena noticia es que los otros retos tuvimos bastante participación. Entonces, en esta ocasión se van a presentar los 3 equipos que resultaron como finalistas y nuestro jurado va a determinar cuál es el primero, segundo y tercer lugar. Entonces, la dinámica va a ser básicamente la siguiente. Vamos a tener la conferencia de NASA para entender un poquito más de qué se trata esto de poder llegar a Marte y que veamos que son planes reales, hay planes de la industria, hay planes de agencias espaciales, en fin, hay mucha gente que está participando en estos proyectos y México, por supuesto, que se puede insertar. Posteriormente, vamos a tener la presentación de los 3 equipos. Levanten la mano los equipos, por favor, que ya están listos. Ok, por favor, denles un cordial aplauso a nuestros participantes. Porque fueron los mejores de todo el país. Tuvimos participación de universidades de varias partes del país, ¿de acuerdo? Entonces solamente vamos a determinar primero, segundo y tercer lugar. Muy bien. Posteriormente, los jurados van a deliberar. Una vez que se delibere, vamos a tener una pequeña mesa donde representantes de aquí de la Universidad de Lupe van a dirigir la mesa para que pues pongamos diferentes puntos de vista respecto a la idea de nombrarla. Y si me hicieran favor de presentarse de los miembros del jurado. Adelante.
¿Qué tal? Buenas tardes. Yo soy el ingeniero Alfredo Morales Esachí. Tengo representación del maestro José Humberto Torres España. Lamentablemente no se pudo presentar, cuestiones de aeronáutica. Yo soy director de proyectos de la iniciativa espacial mexicana MX Space y pues estoy muy orgulloso de todos los chavos que están aquí. Me da mucho gusto ver que hay interés en esta área aeroespacial.
Muchas gracias.
Muy buenas tardes a todos. Yo soy el doctor José Alberto Ramírez Aguilar. Soy jefe del Departamento Aeroespacial de la Facultad de Ingeniería de la UNAM y soy vicepresidente de América Latina y Caribe de la Federación Internacional de Astronáutica y los felicito a todos y que no se nos olvide que el espacio ya no es una opción, es una necesidad.
Buenas tardes, yo soy Humberto Sosa, vengo del Instituto Politécnico Nacional, soy jefe del Laboratorio de Robótica y Mecatrónica y coordinación y coordinador también de la red institucional de expertos en robótica y mecatrónica de todo el instituto. Felicidades a todos por estar aquí.
Bueno, pues sin mayor preámbulo, deseamos muchísimas gracias por su asistencia y pues que disfruten el evento y que puedan aprovechar muchísimo. Gracias.
Hi, can you hear us?
Yes, I can, Alejandro. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. So now the forum is open for you. Thank you very much for your help and your time.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I look forward to presenting. Can you see my video okay?
Yeah.
Hello.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to introduce my colleague here, Dr. Omar Atambe.
Hello there.
So let me know when the presentation comes up.
You can see it.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you. So I want to spend just a few minutes talking about why we as humans are wanting to go out into explore space and we're interested in going to Mars. Then my colleague, Dr. Atambe, he's the NASA Engineering Chief Innovation Officer. He's going to be speaking on how innovation can help us in space exploration. And so they'll speak a little bit about that, and then I'll continue on describing NASA's plans on going to Mars the challenges that we as humans face, and then what we need to do to overcome those challenges for people in Mars and so feel free to let me know if you have any questions. So, the question is, why Mars? I mean, why do we want to go out and explore space? That's a question, I don't know if you face it there, we face it many times by people that ask us, why are we doing what we do? I think it's really the destiny of humankind to answer a lot of fundamental questions that we have. What's the nature of the universe? Are we as humans bound just to live on Earth? Or are we destined to live on other planets? And more importantly, is our planet unique, or is there life elsewhere in the universe? Those are questions that I think we're all wanting to answer. And so I think that's what we're really looking for. If we look at our solar system, Venus is our closest planet, but the temperature is very hot there. And it has an atmosphere of sulfuric acid, and it just is not a good place to go visit. Also, if you look at this from a perspective of how long it would take to travel, going to the moon, it takes about 3 days using our current technologies for a one-way trip, Earth days. If we were to travel to Venus, it would probably take about 150 days. If we go to Mars, depending on the orbit, it's typically about 260 to 280 days. If we go to Europa, which is the next planet that we think is possibly habitable, it would take about 800 days, and it's one of the satellites around Jupiter. So Mars really makes a good case to head out to Mars. And Mars is very similar to Earth. It has approximately the same day-night cycle as Earth, although it gets very cold in the winter, down to about 125 degrees centigrade. But in the warm season, it can be up to like 20 degrees centigrade. It would be very nice. It also offers very, very similar Earth views. They have mountains, they have cliffs, they have valleys, they have dunes. They have natural resources that we found out from our rovers. They have oxygen from the ice or carbon dioxide. They have water, they have iron, they have enough sunlight, and there's enough atmosphere to provide some level of radiation protection. Here on Earth we have about 78% nitrogen and 21% oxygen in our atmosphere. The Mars atmosphere is about 96% carbon dioxide, and then it has smaller components on nitrogen. But at least there is an atmosphere there to provide some protection. Also, it's a very exotic place. It has about 1/3 the Earth's gravity. It has 2 moons that cross each other, so I think that would be very nice to be able to see like 2 moons at night. One of the questions we all have is, was there one time on Mars? We don't know, but that's something we're looking to find out. We also want to know what may be underground. The rovers that we've had visiting the planet, they only explored just a fraction of the Mars surface. We really haven't been able to dig and look underneath and see what's there. And I'll say that many of the technologies that are needed for the human Mars exploration, they exist today. And then the remaining required technologies, that's what we're working on now. And I say we, NASA, other government agencies, not only here in the United States, but across the world. I mean, that's something that fascinates, I think, everybody as humans, and so that's something that we're challenged to do. So we always get asked, well, why can't you just send robots to go explore the surface of go explore the surface of a planet, and why do you have to send humans? Well, I answer that question. Why visit another country, or why visit a national park? Why can't you just look at pictures or see it on your TV? It's not the same. You can't ask a robot how did it feel to step out onto the surface of a new planet. It's much more exciting, and you can get a lot more information from a human. NASA had a few rovers out on the surface of Mars. One was the Sojourner, the Spirit and Opportunity in 2004, and currently the Curiosity rover that's out there. So we're learning quite a bit, but it's all in preparation for sending humans to the surface. And the other thing is that humans can do a lot more than what a rover or a robotic system can do. What Spirit and Opportunity have done in 5.5 years on Mars, you and I could have done that in 1 week. And you know, one of the things that's incredible is that if you look at on the top robotic missions versus human missions, it's taken the Curiosity rover over 4 years to drive half as far as like what the Apollo astronauts did when they drove their buggy on the moon in less than a day. So think about how much more exploration a human can do on a planet than a rover. So there's a lot of opportunities there. Also, humans, they can improvise when things don't go as planned. I mean, that happens very often. It's like typically things come up unexpectedly. We have the capability to make quick decisions and to react very quickly. We can also add capability. That doesn't mean we don't want robots and robotic systems on assisting us, but we can add that capability on robotic missions. I mean, look at some of the repairs that we have to do in space on satellites and systems of space that a human was able to do that would have been very difficult with the current technologies that we have today with robotic systems. So that adds quite a bit. And lastly, you know, they inspire us. The benefits of space exploration, you know, include the generation of scientific knowledge and the diffusion of innovation and creation of markets. You know, it inspires people around the world. And, you know, with like our International Space Station that we have up there right now that has been forged over 68 different countries that have participated in that, it creates relationships between the countries. There's also a lot of indirect benefits. You know, it helps improve the quality of life, such as health and environmental quality. You know, we have Earth imaging satellites, we have telecommunication satellites, and then we also have the intangible things like the benefits such as a deepened understanding of our perspective with our place in the universe. Such as like we saw when the astronauts took pictures from the surface of the moon, and they saw the Earth as just a tiny little blue marble. They called it a blue marble, but that started creating the idea that we really have to start protecting our environment because we're all on this Earth together, regardless of any political divides or geographical boundaries. We're all one human race. So that really opened up our eyes. So with that, before I get into the specific plans on what NASA is doing to get to Mars, I'd like to turn that over to my colleague, Dr. Omar Fatamwa. He's going to talk to you a little bit about innovation and how innovation can help us get to Mars. So with that, I'm going to stop presenting and I'll turn it over to Omar.
Good afternoon, everyone, and I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to come and talk to you guys. It's very interesting. We're talking actually about how much capabilities and talent exist in Mexico. So you guys could be the catalyst to something enormous there in this part of the world. So innovation and technology is moving at the paramount rate very, very fast. If we look just a few decades ago, the space was restricted only to big space agencies and big countries with big amount of money. And that thing is drastically changing actually as we advance technology. So for example, the miniaturization itself of technology has enabled satellites that used to cost hundreds of millions of dollars and last decades in space. Now you can do the same thing for a small fraction of the price. And that enabled digitalization also that enabled so many different startups to get into that field and create new jobs, create new economies, and it allows people like with fresh graduates from college, for example, with a smart idea, with a good idea, to be able to get a small amount of funds and continue to develop amazing companies. And I've seen students, for example, the last few years, they started with just an idea to establishing companies that are worth over $1 billion. And that just 20 years ago would have been impossible to achieve something like that. And the thing is also there's a cross-pollination between different industries. So when people ask us what is the best innovation that's happened in space, and to be honest, there's no such a thing anymore. It's an innovation that applies across the board. So look at 3D printing, for example. 3D printing was initially to produce products and hardware, but now it's actually being used for food industries, it's being used for medical industries, for clothing industries, for construction. So, and for us, obviously, we care about it because we can produce things on planet. It's very difficult and challenging. It costs a lot to take a lot of spares with us. So we can produce things with the resources in situ there and produce as spares as we want. So you can see this one technology, there's so much synergy and so much application across so many different industries. So nowadays, it makes a lot of sense actually to work in groups and collaborate and cross and pollinate with different industries completely. As a matter of fact, this week, Bob and I are having a conference here in Houston, where we invited about 60 executives from like VPs of Snapchat, VPs of Uber, VPs of medical industries, presidents, just top-level executives, because we find so much in common between what we're trying to do. So imagine if we put our collective intellect together to be able to solve some of these challenges and come up with alliances. I think all of us will be benefit from all the stuff. So you guys are very lucky now with this type of technology. Any of you guys can come up with an idea and come up with something great and make it happen and create a great industry, create a product out of it. That's a long time ago, like I said, it was very difficult to do that. So, and it's a pleasure to talk to you guys here, just to touch base on some of these little points I had. If you guys have any question, I'll be happy to answer it. And if not, I'll just add it my colleague, Bob. Any questions from anybody?
Hay un
All right,
micrófono.
thank you very much. It's a pleasure talking to you.
Hay un micrófono, por si quieren hacer preguntas eventualmente, me pueden comentar.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and continue presenting. And can you see my desktop again, the presentation?
Yeah. Yes.
Blanca or Alejandro, can you see my presentation?
No.
No, we can't see the presentation right now.
Blanca or Alejandro?
Yes, yeah, we are here. We cannot see your screen yet. Wait.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you. Can you hear us? Bob? 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 No.
Hello, Alejandro?
Yes. I hear you. I can see you. I can see your presentation in my computer, but we cannot see your presentation in the computer that is presenting. So you're okay. You're presenting okay. Just 1 second, please. Yep.
Hello, Alejandro, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Whoa, can you hear me? Whoa.
Bob, we can see your presentation now. If you wanna start. Sorry, just give us a second.
Hey, Bob.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you present? Yes.
Hello, Alejandro?
Yes.
Or Alejandro?
We can hear you.
Okay. Did we lose the connection or?
Yeah, let's try. Are you presenting? No?
I just put up the presentation again.
Okay. Yeah, it's fine. It's fine now. We can see the presentation.
Okay. Were you able to hear my colleague, Dr. Hadamid?
Yeah. Though, yeah. Yes, now we can continue.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So, so this is the global exploration roadmap that NASA has for its plans on going to Mars. You know, so we started, I don't know if you can see my cursor in the video or not. Okay, so we planned, you know, right now we have the International Space Station. We have plans to go back to the moon and then onward to Mars. But I, you know, we call this the Global Exploration Roadmap because although this is NASA's plans, it doesn't solely rely on NASA, but on many partners from within the United States and across the world. And it's not only just government agencies, but it's also private companies and universities. So it's really a collaborative effort across the entire planet. Because as you can see here, we have the International Space Station. China is planning on building their own space station. There's also going to be future platforms that other countries want to build. Going back to the moon, there are several European countries that are planning on creating what's called the Moon Village. So it's a very exciting time for really the entire world on exploring space. And with respect to NASA, some of the things that we've done, NASA was started back in 1958, and they started with the Mercury program, and then they moved on to the Gemini program. Then the Apollo program was started in 1961, and that was designed to land humans on the surface. So prior to that, those first missions of Mercury and Gemini, it was really just designed to get humans into space and to see how they would do in space. And then after the Apollo mission, they started the Space Shuttle program. The Space Shuttle was a vehicle that essentially you could think of it as like a truck. And it was really used to build up the International Space Station. So it was able to take up the larger elements of the International Space Station. And so the International Space Station was approved in 1984, and it began construction 14 years later in 1988. And it's been up there now since 2000. So if you think about it, for those 18 years old and younger, we've always had humans living in space. It's pretty incredible. But our plan is to go beyond lower orbit where the space station is and go into lunar orbit. I'll be talking about a lunar gateway that we're planning right now as part of this exploration roadmap. Eventually getting all the way out to Mars. And then someday, hopefully Mars isn't the end, but it's just a stopping point on the way even further out into space. So we look at it from a perspective of that, we're looking at testing out things in lower orbit. So we've been doing that continuously, and we plan to continue that on the International Space Station. Then we plan to build and operate a gateway in lunar orbit. And that lunar gateway is really going to be more like a stopping ground on the way to Mars. And then we've been doing human and robotic operations, and we plan to continue those on the surface of the moon. And then eventually taking crewed missions with humans to the Mars vicinity, and then eventually to land on Mars. So this is the vehicle that we're currently developing. It's the NASA Orion space vehicle. We plan to have that ready to launch here in the 2020 timeframe. And to be able to launch that vehicle, we're developing what's called the SLS, or the Space Launch System. It's essentially going to be a heavy lift version of a rocket that can either take the Orion crew capsule on here, or very large heavy payloads to start building some of the larger elements that we want, which would include the gateway, which is going to be the lunar orbiting platform around the moon, or also eventually the transit vehicle that would be the vehicle that would go to Mars. And so coming up here in June of 2020 is what we're calling Exploration Mission 1 flight. And it'll be an unmanned flight of our Orion crew vehicle. We've already flown one. It was called the Exploration Flight Test 1. Now we're doing the Exploration Mission 1 test, and it'll be a vehicle that'll be uncrewed, and it'll orbit around the moon. And we want to test out all of the systems for that. Then we'll be following that by the EM2 flight test, which is going to be in July of 2023, and this will be also testing out all of the environmental control licenses. And this will be a manned flight, and it'll fly even further out than any vehicle manned has ever gone before. And this will be in preparation for our longer duration missions. And then we're looking at building a gateway. And the gateway, you can think of it as just a stopping point between the Earth and the Moon. It'll be orbiting the Moon, but it'll be used to help conduct lunar missions down to the surface of the ground. So here's just a diagram of what it'll entail. There's going to be a propulsion element that will be going up here in the near future. It'll also be, we'll have a habitation area, we'll have a sample and return location to return samples from the Moon. And it'll also allow for docking of not only the Orion crew module, but other vehicles as well from other countries. And so we look at this as, you can think of it as like a gas station for doing exploration outside of Earth's low orbit. And it doesn't plan to be crewed, attended all year round. We plan to have maybe 30 to 90 day missions where crews could stay on board while they go down to the surface of the Moon and back and then return back. And then what is our path to the lunar surface? Well, so right now we're looking at sending small landers to start doing exploration just like we've done in the past. And it's not only us, it's other countries that have planned to do that, start assessing what sites to land in and what sites would be most optimal for doing in situ resource utilization type of task. In other words, trying to process the lunar regolith, the soil, to see about recovering oxygen and water and other elements from the soil for eventually processing the fuel and sustainable items that would be needed for a human presence on them. And so where we're at now is we have the space station where we're in lower orbit and we've been advancing technologies. We're building up the SLS, the Space Launch System, the Orion vehicle. We're beginning to build plans for the gateway. We're looking at small robotic landers and medium landers, and then eventually larger landers and rovers that would be operating on the surface of the Moon. And then we'll be looking beyond that in the mid to late 2020s for expanding that to the transit vehicle out to Mars. So our current model right now is, we have the International Space Station. So that's in a collaboration with over 68 countries. We also have international collaboration on getting crew and cargo up to the space station. We have the Russian vehicle, we have the Japanese vehicles, and we have the European service modules that are all part of this effort. We're also working with various U.S. companies, Cygnus, we're working with SpaceX, Sierra Nevada, and on building human space vehicles to get us to lower orbit as well as for the cargo and crew up to the space station. And we'll be doing that. We're looking for international partners for the gateway activities. So what are the challenges of getting to Mars? There's several spaceflight risks. One of them is the physiological changes of this living in space on a long mission, all the way from the deconditioning of our bodies to fluid shifts and bone loss. We also have to worry about space radiation. There's long-term risk for cancer as well as cardiovascular risk due to radiation. The other thing is the distance from the Earth. It takes about 40 minutes to communicate up to Mars, and so you're pretty much alone. And so there's a need for autonomous medical care. You can't really return home for treatment. And then also the environment can be very hostile. So you have to have a very good environmental control life support system that protect you. And then the other thing is, how are you going to be able to sustain yourself from a food and water? You think about a 3-year trip, round trip, that's a lot of food and water you need to take with you. So you need to be able to replenish those on orbit. And then also just the general isolation and confinement. Being together, like if it's a 4-person crew for 2.5 years, that can get very trying on people. So that's going to be a big challenge. So on the International Space Station, like I mentioned, we've had people on board since 2000, and we've been conducting a lot of science experiments and doing a lot of advancement of technology to help solve those problems and challenges. So what are some of the challenges that we have? Well, so in this column here, I don't know if you can see this column here, but this is the space station today. And this is the future, deep space future. So for example, on the space station today, we can recover about 90% of the water that we use up on space station, whether it be from the condensation or even processing of urine and getting it clean again to drink. So we're working on that. Our goal would be to recover about 98% of the water that's used up on. Right now, we can recover about 50% of the oxygen from the carbon dioxide on the space station. We're looking to increase that to about 75%. Also, big thing is creating more reliable equipment. So we have, right now, our equipment fails on the average of about every 6 months, different types of equipment. We're wanting to increase that to over 30 months, over 2 years. We also have, to do a lot of exercising to help us not diminish our bone mass and maintain health for the crew. Because if you think about it, on a 260 to 280 day mission to Mars, you're in a weightless environment, and then all of a sudden you're put back on the surface of a planet with gravity. That could be very detrimental on the exploration activities. You need to maintain the crew. And then also radiation protection, how are we going to protect the crew? So these are some of the things that we're looking at. Also, the logistics. If you think about being on a trip, imagine having to pack for a trip that's going to last you 280 days. That's a lot of clothing that you need to take. So again, it's all determining how are you going to make things. Dr. Hatamla talked about the RFID technology, where we need to use that up on the space station. That's a very good opportunity. And then also some of the things that are needed for that. So the capabilities needed to make human space exploration possible. And this is again, it's cross-cutting. It's the launch propulsion systems, communication systems, the guidance and navigation. Of course, the environmental life support systems is critical. Advanced electronics, avionics, autonomous robotic systems, and then the human interface systems, and then the in-situ resource utilization systems. And those are all the things that are really needed. And again, all of these things that I talked about, are things that are not only helping for advancing space exploration, but it's also helping us here down on Earth on everyday life. It's contributed to many of the advancements that we've had, from solar panels to the miniaturization of electronics, to very lightweight materials, to water purification systems, conservation systems here on the Earth, and satellite communication. So, it's really going to help all of the countries participating to help advance their technologies and the economic relevance for space. And it's really going to be opening up, new technologies. If you think about when we first started exploring space, all of the technologies that have advanced since then, it's really been incredible. But, we have a lot of challenges, but the good thing is that we're all in this together. We've been exploring space now for the past 50 years in low Earth orbit, and look at all the benefits it's gained us. I think the next 50 years is really going to be incredible. And with that, that's all I had. If there's any questions or.
Alguien que tenga alguna duda, la pueden hacer en español, pero es muy caro, pero lo puedo traducir. While some students think about a question, I was wondering what changes did the new administration put in place in NASA? Do they affect Mars activities? Are they in another area? You could talk a little bit about other area.
So you're talking the changes in administration with our new NASA administrator?
Yeah, I guess the new administration, I meant the new presidency, but yeah, sure.
Oh, okay, well, so I guess I'll be general with goals. So since we're a government agency, one of the things we always worry about is that, we can get changed in direction. So for example, under President Bush, we were going back to the moon, and then under President Obama, we got changed that we were going to go first explore an asteroid and do asteroid work. And so we changed slightly our technology, but now under President Trump, we're looking back at going back to the moon and Mars. So what we try to do at NASA is really focus on the technologies that are going to advance us to go into deeper space exploration. Because one of the things that is common is that there's things that we need, there's roadblocks that we need to overcome regardless of really where we're going. We know as an agency, we want to explore space. That's our charter. And whether it's going to the surface of the moon, it's going to an asteroid, or it's going to Mars, we know that we need to advance certain types of technology. And so we try to stay focused on that and not so much the politics. I will say, just on my personal perspective, I don't know how it is there, but if we focus on the politics, we go crazy. So we think it's a lot easier just to stay focused on the physics and the science.
Thanks. Dura, sí. ¿Qué quieres pasar?
En español.
No. ¿En español? En español, si quieres.
¿Cuáles son los más altos riesgos para posponer o incluso abandonar esta misión a Mars?
Yeah, that's a very good question. One student is asking, what are the greatest risks to postpone or abandon this Mars roadmap that you have if you've identified the ones not close?
So you're saying that, so what are our biggest risks? Or
yeah, if you've identified some of the bigger risks that would postpone or
cancel.
Yeah, that would cancel or postpone this Mars roadmap that you presented.
Well, so I think, some of the larger challenges that we have, for example, radiation protection, that's clearly a human risk, but then we have discussions about, typically radiation doesn't immediately affect you, it affects you long term. So we see the effects of radiation a few years down the road. So there's been some discussions about if you have a very young astronaut going on a trip to Mars, and I say young, maybe in their mid to late 30s, would they be willing to take the risk of then coming back after like a 2 or 3 year mission where they're still relatively young and possibly experience cancer when they're in their late 40s or early 50s. And assuming we don't have a way to mitigate the radiation, versus if we were to send an older astronaut, let's say an astronaut in their 50s, that maybe they don't start experiencing the effects of the radiation dosages until their 70s. So there's things like that we're looking at. I wouldn't call them showstoppers. I would say the biggest thing that we have to overcome now is from a life support system perspective and reliability perspective. So and what I mean by that is being able to regenerate the water, because we wouldn't be able to carry up enough water with us to make a trip to Mars. Also, being able to regenerate the oxygen. Right now up at the space station, we replenish the supplies up at the space station every few months with the vehicle. And so we're looking at technologies that not only from a life support system perspective, but also things that maybe someone, you haven't really given much thought. For example, how to clean your clothes with little or no water. We're looking at that. How to have food that to be able to eat And then the other thing is how do we handle human waste? Because that could be very large on a long trip. And so there's a lot of those things that, again, they're not showstoppers, but those are big challenges that we're working on every day. And I would say those type of challenges also can help us down here on Earth from a conservation standpoint and from just bringing new ideas to areas where maybe they don't have as much water. Because one of the concerns we have just here on the Earth is water shortage during drought.
Okay. Thanks. ¿Alguna pregunta? Sí.
Que había mencionado muchos riesgos como de salud física, pero fue como de los riesgos de salud mental, no de mental health.
Okay. So you've mentioned a lot of physical health risks, and the question is if you've explored the mental health risks of being isolated in Mars. So yeah, that is the question.
Oh, so we do studies on isolation and even just the teamwork dynamics. So for example, when we fly astronauts up, and I say we, the Americans or the Italians or the Europeans or the Russians, when we're going to set up a crew that's going to live up on the space station, typically before that crew gets selected, they get trained for about a year, and they train together. And the reason why they train together is because they want to understand, all of the astronauts who get selected are very smart, very intelligent people, very capable. But one of the things that comes into play even everywhere is the team dynamics. And so we want to make sure that they're able to work together and that they can accomplish tasks as a team. And so a lot of times we find that the personalities don't mesh, and it makes it very difficult. And so that's one of the things, especially like on longer duration missions, that's going to become more critical. And so one of the things that we're looking at also is how do we maintain that team environment on a long duration trip? So we do studies where we put people in even though they're short, together to see how they conduct themselves in team environments, and then we'll simulate like stressful events and see how they can interact, especially in confined quarters. So that is a concern, and there's a lot of research being done on that and on how to mitigate that. And I would even say they're doing studies on even eating not the same type of food, because that also affects how people react when they're eating the same type of food day after day. Also, when they have the same type of lighting, humans, their moods change if they're in a very gloomy condition. The weather is very rainy or cold. After a while, if their mood changes. It's the same thing with in a confined and in space vehicle. So there's all those type of human factors that have to be addressed.
Yeah, thanks. Sí.
Yeah, sí. En el pasado, nuestro método de selección para los astronautas era de que no tuvieran como que historial de enfermedades psicológicas, ¿no? O sea, de trastornos, sí. A veces incluso después de principios todavía también incluso familiares. Todavía se toma en cuenta ese como que característica para ser aceptado como astronauta o ya no.
Sobre todo en enfermedades mentales.
Sí, por ejemplo, que presentaban depresión o trastorno de personalidad en algún punto de su vida, pero que ya están curados. O un familiar cercano, antes se tomaba en cuenta para, pues lo descartaban. Okay. Ya no actualmente está descartado.
Yeah, the question is, formerly, for NASA used to screen astronauts by selecting those without mental health backgrounds. Is that something that is done nowadays? Is that something that's actively being screened for?
For you mean screen for like medical, mental histories?
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what they screen them for. I do know they look at if they have any conditions that would possibly prevent them from being able to undergo the rigors of space flight. So for example, if they have a heart condition or if they have problems with kidney stones or things like that may prevent them from being able to successfully conduct a mission, that may prevent them from getting accepted. But it's from my understanding, it's typically medical conditions that can cause issues. I think from a mental screening, I think they just want to look at how can they operate in a team environment? How can they handle stress?
Okay, thanks. I think that's more or less our time for questions. Maybe there's one more. Yeah. So someone will come up to ask the last question.
Well, once that this mission to Mars is achieved, are there any plans to already made about what to do next? Like try to colonize Mars or something like that?
So in the big picture, I think there's that's sort of like the hope of many people is to be able to live off the land at Mars, and likewise it's with the moon. It's like the goal is to be able to have a sustainable environment, and then eventually use the Mars as a platform to then launch even further explorations further out. But before we get to that point, we need to make sure that it's a sustainable environment for humans on the surface. So for example, one of the analogs that we use right now is Antarctica. Antarctica is a continent that's multinational collaboration because the environment is so harsh. People from all of the countries come there to do research on that continent, and they learn to live in that environment. So we look at that as something similar that's going to be happening on the moon, and then once an environment of the moon is established such as that, it'll help flush out any problems we'll have living on a planet that's even farther away. Because right now, the goal is to work out those problems before we get to an environment like Mars, where it's not an easy way to return back to that get-go.
Thanks. Thanks both Robert and Omar for this very interesting presentation. And thank you for your cooperation with the internet.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak with y'all, and I wish you all the best of luck.
Entonces, ahora vamos a pasar a la parte de las exposiciones de los concursantes. Y me parece que el primer equipo, los 30 segundos.
El primer equipo por presentar es Air to Mars Mission.
Good afternoon. We are Earth to Mars mission, and we are Diego Pérez Reyes and Javier Ramos Pulido.
Well, hello everyone. As my partner say, I'm Diego Pérez Reyes. I'm a student from Instituto Tecnológico Autónomo de México.
And I'm from Instituto Politécnico Nacional.
First, I'm going to start talking about how we're planning to launch our mission. This project of us is a whole complete mission which includes launching, traveling to Mars, and a whole stay at Mars surface, and then another travel back. First, launching is a problem that was solved like in this decade by several private companies which are working in the aerospatial community. For example, here I have a comparison between the spatial, which was used at the beginning of this century, and the SpaceX Falcon Heavy, which is like largest rocket available now. Well, first, the spatial used to carry around 24 tons, and it used to cost 450 million each. So now, the SpaceX solution can carry around 3 times what the shuttle once had, and it cost 90 million. This opens an opportunity for us to launch multiple missions into LEO, which are going to be used to build a station. This will help us to get to Mars in a safer way, which we're going to present next. The missions are considered into 3 steps. The first one is to launch and build the MTS, which is an acronym for Mars Transport Station. More about it later. Then we gotta land humans to Mars. That's like the main goal here. And for it, we have to ship like the spacecraft with people. Well, first, the main reason why we're using private solutions is because they are cheaper. Here we have the small chart comparing an expendable rocket, which are the ones we use for example, for the moon missions or for ISS missions. And the reusable rockets that are like the thing right now, where we can build just one rocket and launch it several times. This reduces the cost of the metal and the resources by almost everything, because the only thing we need to use or to do is to refuel the spacecraft. Now into station development. First, well, the station is the Mars Transportation Station, which is gonna transport, as the name says, the astronauts into Mars orbit. This is gonna solve several risks that normal spacecraft have. And this assembly process is gonna be separated into 3 steps, which are getting all the modules, more about it in a minute, to build a rotational module. This rotational module is gonna help us to solve the problem that is currently on the NASA missions, that is to stop bone density loss, which is a physiological problem that appeared into the astronauts that are habitating the ISS. Well, the last step is to join everything together. That is, basically the whole, well, the completion of the building process. Okay, first, the rotational module, as I said, is, well, and as the name said, is a module for the spacecraft that basically rotates. This can generate an artificial gravity by implementing normal force into the human body by rotating it using the centrifugal acceleration. In order to build it, we have to launch it in 4 separated rockets, and then rotate them into position. From here, well, everything here is going to happen in LEO, which is low Earth orbit, where the space station is right now. Well, first separating, then rotating, which involves using some low thrust propellants, fixing it into place in order to have them reach each other in orbit, then connecting them into place. The final one is kind of weird, because the access docks are actually not a thing included in the rotational module, but they are included in the habitational module that we're going to see next. Okay, this is a diagram of the MTS build. Is a 4-step station. The first one is the instruments and field module. This one is basically the trunk of the spacecraft. The next one is the rotational hallway or rotational module. This will have, as here says, a hallway where astronauts will run their exercise in order to stop bone density reduction. The final two ones are living and supplies modules, and the other one is a whole structure that is planned to storage a solar sail. More about it later. Well, we have two hatches in order to carry a crew capsule inside it. Well, that's the solar sail. Here, this is about how to carry these MTS to Mars orbit. Current technologies use solid boosters, and then we use chemical boosters in orbit in order to escape Earth's gravity. By doing this, it turns the spaceship into a sort of slingshot, because you have to point where you gotta place the spacecraft and then launch it. You can, well, it's harder to change direction during the travel. By using these two technologies, which are the solar sail and an ionic thruster, it can have like limited acceleration by using both the solar sail, the solar wind, and xenon propellant boosters. This will help us to reduce by half the time of the whole travesty. For example, Mars commonly takes between 220 and 290 days to reach, but using continuous acceleration on the current systems that are being developed, it can shorten it into 150 and 110 days without using a Hoffman transfer trajectory.
Living in Mars. After reaching Mars, the first thing we will do will be sending the hub to the surface. The hub is mainly the place where our crew that will go to Mars will live. There will be mostly a main area in Veggie Labs. This will be more, the main area will be mostly a place where the crew will live and make studies. It will mostly laboratories. It will have three entrances to facilitate the entry to the hub. And that's Veggie. This is based on the project made in the ISS, the International Space Station, in which they produce new vegetables on space. These vegetables are mostly grown thanks to a LED lights, which help the plants make photosynthesis, where even in place where you can't have the natural light of the sun. The energy production, this is an important factor in Mars, because in Mars the natural climate doesn't let us give us very many difficulties. Mostly the dust storms, the famous dust storms that, for example, not that very recently, the rovers Spirit had problems. For example, that Spirit is mainly propelled by solar energy. The dust storm mostly made it unusable because it couldn't produce the energy needed for it to function. So the answer to this problem will be the nuclear energy. And it too will help us to be able to land anywhere on Mars, because the solar energy doesn't reach as well as in Mars as on Earth. it's around 65% the irradiation that comes from the sun in the equator, and it gets ever thinner near the poles, near the poles on Mars.
Well, finally, summarizing the whole mission, our goal is to reduce the costs of this mission that are going to represent a problem in the future, because, well, space travel is very expensive. The main goal is to do it way cheaper. By using some of the technologies we shown here, we expect it to become a reality. There are current technologies that are being or they are already developed. Well, some additional comment before we stop is that the RTG is currently used on the Curiosity rover on Mars. This is mainly because of the thin Mars atmosphere and the problems of Mars to the sun distance. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, that was the presentation of Earth to Mars mission. But part of their work was also to make a video. So we will present the video that lasts 3 minutes, and just will grade the video and the presentation. So we will continue with the next team, which is Mars Space House. Yo lo ponemos.
Hello, we are the Mars Steakhouse. I'm Robert Acosta.
And I'm David Gonzalo Castañeda Espinosa.
We are from PAEP, and we chose the first challenge is radiation.
Well, the problem that we identify is radiation. In Mars, the radiation is 2.5 times higher than at the International Space Station, and it's 12 times higher than on the Earth. That's because on Mars they don't have protective magnetosphere like we have on Earth, and also the Mars atmosphere is thinner than the ones that are on Earth. So we decided to solve this problem. We have the idea to build a radiation protects that can completely protect astronauts from radiation on Mars. So we think that the best structure that we can use for build that base is a geodesic dome made of Martian soil and PEC. Why do we choose a geodesic dome? We choose it because a geodesic dome is a really structurally rigid structure, because it is made just of triangles, and triangles plays a good structure because it can distribute all the pressure. Also, a geodesic dome is need less building materials and it have more space because you don't need for another structures inside to keep rigid. Now, how we are planning to do it? Our idea is that geodesic dome have a radius of 5 meters, and the structure will be made of 50 centimeters of Martian soil containing between 2 layers of 10 centimeters of PEC. In that image, we can see it. So we can see that black layers are the PEC, and the brown is the Martian soil. Also, you can see it in that image.
Now, you may ask, how are we going to use the Martian soil to make the bricks? Well, in a studio that the University of California made, they discovered that the Martian soil can be compact by only applying a little pressure. So they made tiny bricks like this. Well, actually they're bigger, but we can use that technology to make the structure that we need. This means that we can make the 6 different types of triangle prisms that will help us from the geodesic dome, so it can be perfect and it doesn't have any flaws in the space, and it falls by itself.
Okay, so why do we choose these materials? In this picture, we can see some PEG plates, and we choose PEG because it is already used on aerospace industry because it has a high resistance to radiation and to extreme temperatures. And also, it's a really strong material. And we choose to use Martian soil because in our dome, Martian soils represent the major material that we use. And if we use the raw matter that we have on Mars, we don't have to bring all of this matter from there, and it means that we're going to save a lot of money. And also, if we use the Martian soil in our structure, it means that we can keep the temperature inside our dome because Mars could be in winter really, really cold.
Okay, now, well, which is the Gale crater, which is the same site that the Curiosity landed. And why? Well, we want to land like by the Curiosities because the Curiosity has proved that it was water in the history of the crater that was formed by a meteor impact. Now, this meteor impact punched a hole in the terrain that injected soils and rocks that landed around the crater. So this means that maybe there's soil and that stuff can have proof that was present of past life. And also, well, I mean, it has a diameter of 154 kilometers, and this means that we have a lot of space to explore because it also has estimated age of 3.5 to 3.8 million years old. So this means that that crater has a lot of information that we can actually use. And it's a very good space because it has the equatorial side. That means that we can land easily there more than in the poles.
So you ask yourself, so how can we build this geodesic dome? It's very simple. We can use either a crane that it's located in the spaceship, or either we can use a crane that is mounted on the Mars rover. Since our dome is only it only has a 5-meter radius, we don't need to go very high to be able to build the dome, so we can get around that pretty easily. As you can see here, we can connect various domes, so we can continue to make a bigger and bigger base as the missions continue to Mars, so we're not only limited to one dome. So major problem in Mars is like, how do we get oxygen to breathe? Because, well, as we know, the Martian atmosphere doesn't have as much oxygen as our atmosphere. So we have two options. The first one is use a like traditional manner and try to find water and break it in by hydrolysis and obtaining the oxygen from it. The other one is in the Martian regolith. We can find this rock known as almanite that is composed of iron, titanium, and oxygen. And if we to this rock we add hydrogen and heat it, we can obtain by this chemical reaction pure iron, titanium dioxide, and water. The titanium dioxide we can use later for on other missions to produce either titanium or more oxygen, but we're going to focus on the water that produces. So that water we can either use it directly as water to drink or to any other purposes, or we can split it into hydrogen and oxygen by hydrolysis, therefore allowing us to have oxygen to breathe, or either use the hydrogen to start a new reaction, or even produce using the hydrogen and the CO2 of the atmosphere to produce methane that can power the spaceship. Also, an important part of living in Mars is that we need to grow our own food, since we don't. It will require a lot of fuel to bring all the food required for the entire trip. So the problem with growing our food in Mars is that it gets exposed to radiation. So under our dome, we can have a small section to produce food from plants. This could be a hydroponic system that the water in the hydroponic system contains all the nutrients necessary for the plants. Therefore, we don't need to use any soil. And also, we can make the plants grow even faster by using LEDs. It has been proven by NASA in the veggie experiment that using a combination of red and blue light on specific wavelengths, depending on which state the plant is, like it's growing or producing fruits, you can make it grow faster and produce even more food.
And also with the problem with the plastic, it's like the water. How do you feed the plants? Well, the water can be also taken from Mars. We don't actually have to make all the process, but it can. But we have the idea to filter the water on Mars by inverse osmosis. It's a process that has like one filter to remove solids, another filter to be permeable membrane that can that prevents chlorine to pass. That's what contaminates the water from Mars. And it finally has the tank to stock up the water that we need, and another to the residual water. Now, this process helps to take up the chlorine that is in the water on Mars that affects all the plants and humans in a healthy way. So that's another option to the water for the plants. Finally, our conclusion is that we propose a geodesic dome that completely protects astronauts from radiation. That's our proposal, completely, not merely, but completely. And it only uses raw matter from Mars. It's a good thing. We don't have to spend a lot here on Earth. Therefore, we have it on Mars. And analyzing the calculus, we conclude that our proposal is viable. Super viable, and so it's a very good one. And that's it. Any questions? Any questions?
I have some questions if you can. You say that you will use the bricks from Martian soil, but when you get there, you need to live somewhere. Do you have any plan for a temporary structure?
Well, when you arrive, you're gonna first live on the spaceship, as you've been living for the past 6 months that you've been traveling to Mars. And the plan is to focus mainly on finding water and building the first dome, so you can have a safe habitat.
All right, I have another one. You say that from ilmenite you can obtain oxygen,
right,
and water, but you need hydrogen to make that chemical process.
Yeah.
Where do you plan to obtain that hydrogen?
Yeah, well, you could extract it from the atmosphere, but that's really complicated. It will the first reaction that you do, you will need like a small tank of hydrogen that you will bring from Earth. And afterwards, from the electrolysis that you produce from the water that you produce on the reaction, you use that hydrogen to start a new reaction. So it maintains itself.
So you need to bring hydrogen to continue to produce more hydrogen to produce.
Yeah, you need like a little hydrogen to start the reaction, and afterwards it sustains itself.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions?
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Our next is Facebox. The videos we will present at the end of the presentation, the 3 videos.
So, hi, my name is Julio Bell,
And I am Jesselyn Gomez.
and we are Spacehawks. We come from the Universidad from Mexicali, Baja California. First of all, we carefully analyze all the different challenges that currently prevent man from reaching and inhabiting Mars. And while technology in the past few years have solved some of those challenges, mass management still remains as one of the main issues and limitations that keep us from reaching Mars in a manned mission. So, why is mass management such a big challenge? First of all, mass requirements. Well, the largest payload we've ever landed on Mars was 2012's Curiosity rover, weighing in at 907 kilograms. It is far less than what a manned mission would weigh.
Likewise, current launch systems can deliver payloads of up to 100 tons to low Earth orbit. But the number decreases dramatically the farther we want to travel.
Even if we could launch an enormous amount of mass to Mars, current experimental entry, descent, and landing systems only enable us to land up to 3 tons of mass, not nearly enough for what a manned mission would need. Now, why is that? Current EDL technologies use air assist maneuvers. What is an air assist maneuver? Basically, it's using atmospheric drag to decelerate the mass of the spacecraft. Now, the manned mission is going to weigh a lot more than 3 tons. So, we can't use air assist maneuvers because the Martian atmosphere is around 100 times less dense than Earth, so it's not viable. Now, retro rockets, as Curiosity used, aren't viable either. Why? Because it would use an enormous amount of energy to accelerate such a huge mass.
Now, this is a proposal. We will go deeper into the next slides. First, we're going to start with the weight management at launch. Due to the difficulty of launching a huge amount of mass, we propose splitting the total mission payload into more manageable payloads. Additionally to the spacecraft carrying payload, at least 3 transport vehicles need to be launched. The first one is a Mars Ascent Vehicle, or MAV. The second one is an Air Return Vehicle, or ERV. And the last one is a spacecraft with deep space travel capabilities. Also, we have an optional one. We're going to explain it later. The first one, the Mars Ascent Vehicle. This will help the astronauts rendezvous the orbiting station and to go to the ERV. Also, this is important to note that for a fully fueled MAV, the propellant alone will weigh 33 tons. This is the reason why the MAV was launched empty tank before the manned spacecraft arrived. So it can quick start and integrate it into resource utilization propellant production system in time when the manned mission ends, approximately 4 years after landing. The other one, the Air Return Vehicle. This vehicle is going to be put on Martian orbit and will be available for the crew. And once the mission is over, and thus it needs to be fully fueled.
And our third one, the spacecraft with deep space travel capabilities will transport the crew, and we have the necessary supplies for the journey. And this one is the optional one, is the transport shuttle. And if the transport shuttle is launched, this will serve to transport scientific payload from Mars surface to the orbiting station. The use of this vehicle really increases the potential amount of payload, scientific payload, that can be retrieved.
Now, why is this vehicle optional? Our goal as Spacebox was to make a proposal to reach Mars as soon as possible. So we know and we understand budget may be an issue. So if the budget, this transfer shuttle should be taken along. Why? Because by scientific payload, we mean Martian regolith. So it's of great scientific value. Now, we go on to the establishment of a modular Martian orbiting cargo station. First of all, after traveling around the defined orbital trajectory, the modules will aero-capture into a 500 kilometers circular orbit around Mars. This will be done through the use of two post-atmospheric exit maneuvers. Now, finally, the modules will define a transfer orbit to the uppermost bounds of the Martian thermosphere, around 200 kilometers from the surface. Now, specifically, it will be a Hohmann transfer. Okay, so now the autonomous rendezvous and the coupling of the modules. Now, this will be done mainly in two steps. First of all, will be the stabilization and the alignment of the module. Then will be the coupling of the modules using automated clamps and the aid of the vision system. Now, if you may please look at the figure, you may see some planes, XY and YC. Please note the plane YC because it's going to be important later on. Okay, so how does it work? First of all, the cargo modules will have to maneuver to get closer to each other. This will be done through the use of careful orbital mechanics calculations and the communication between modules. Now, this communication is going to be, at first, be carried out with microwaves. Then, as the modules get closer together and the speed between them decreases, it will be switched to infrared. Now, why infrared? The thing is, as modules get closer, a need for data integrity and reliability arises. So, as we know, infrared has a higher frequency than microwaves, albeit a smaller wavelength. That's why we don't use infrared from the beginning. So yes, it is also important to note that by this point, all further delta V corrections will have to be made through the use of microthrusters. Now, once the modules are sufficiently close, the coupling algorithm, aided by the use of an inertial measurement unit, or IMU, will determine a series of microthruster maneuvers to stabilize and align the modules in the YC plane, as we mentioned. Now, for terms of efficiency and propellant use, modules that have not been coupled yet will have a higher priority when it comes to propellant expenditure. This is so we can manage the resources better. Now, I'm going to show you a demonstration of the alignment and coupling process. It's done in SolidWorks. So there we have the modules aligned in the YC plane, and then is the process that I'm going to explain in the next slide. So there we have it, the modules are finally coupled. Okay, finally, the coupling of modules using automated clamps aided by a vision system. Well, once aligned in the YC plane, the algorithm, the coupling algorithm, aided by a computer vision system, will determine a series of stabilizing maneuvers so the modules can stabilize and align in a bidimensional plane. So when they are finally aligned, a system of automated clamps will activate and the couple will only be assembled. Okay. We also have the possibility of further expanding this sort of space container. We're calling it an orbiting station, but at this point, it's just a space container. But the thing is, we expect this to be replicated several times in further missions. Now, it's also expected to be adaptive. So during the next missions, several modules will be specifically designed to the needs of the mission. Now, you could design and add a communications module, a habitational module, and I don't know, sensors and technology and laboratory. Now, specifically, we do recommend adding as soon as possible a habitation model. Why? For emergency situations, specifically the abortion of a Martian surface mission.
Now, planning and transport of payload. Once the orbiting space orientation is it will deploy a 3 tons cargo base. Once deployed, this cargo will employ a hypersonic inflatable aerodynamic decelerator and will undergo atmospheric entry. This is the picture of that.
This is going to be at the request. Now, for this process, we're going to use swarm robotics. We're going to use swarm robotics mainly to coordinate the cargo wings so they don't collide with each other, and also to land them in a specific area. So it's going to be more convenient for the crew to go and pick them up. Now, if the optional transfer shuttle was taken along, this can dock with the orbiting station and deliver its scientific payload, ready to be recovered by another vehicle later on. And finally, we're going to present the prototype of the cargo models. So just a moment while I set up the program. Well, first of all, okay, so first of all, here we have, well, the conceptualization of the modules. So this right here works through the use of a planar. This works through the use of planar coils and an analog power signal. This is mainly how wireless transfer protocols work. So thanks to the angle of transmission, the power signal will only transfer completely if the modules are completely aligned. So in terms we can understand right now, this LED will only shine at its brightest when the modules are perfectly aligned. So inside this specific module lies an IMU. And as you can see, it moves when I move it. So this is done because the IMU measures the differences in roll, yaw, and pitch. So I don't know if you can see it there, but it should be at the end of the program, but okay. So this algorithm we specifically wrote for this presentation works through the use of those the use of those data, and it represents a 3D model. But the actual implementation will use that data to dictate the microprocessor maneuvers. So I will make a demonstration of how it actually works in space. So okay, remember, this is a representation of the actual coupling mechanism. So as we have online modules, the signal is weak. So even though they're touching, we know they are not aligned. But as soon as we start aligning them, the beep gets louder and the shine gets brighter. So this not only works in the YZ plane, because we also have to have it aligned on the bidimensional plane. So even though they're touching, and even though they are aligned on the YZ plane, unless they are perfectly aligned bidimensionally, it won't couple again.
And finally, the application scenario. Due to the amount of different uses for autonomous model of construction, we have separated into industry ends and aquatic systems.
Okay, well, first of all, the industry, it has a lot of uses. Going from even building a modular apartment building to even building the new space station that is planned for the next decade. So, okay, also, specifically, it's interesting what happened with aquatic systems. So, because of the energy resulting from water displacement when moving an object underwater, external energy needed to lift the object is not that much. So, it may benefit in a similar way to its place implementation via the use of thrusters. Such an example would be a pipeline or the construction of an oil rig. And finally, the autonomous docking of cargo containers, which is mainly done manually currently through the manual maneuvering of actuators or transfer vehicles. But through the implementation of our algorithm, this process can be automated, and all those imprecisions and loss of material that sometimes happen can be avoided. Okay, so finally, as a challenge conclusion, our proposal solves all those challenges we previously talked about with the use of current technology. So it is obvious that we want to enable the start of the mission as soon as possible. And this can be possible as soon as the next launch opportunity comes in place, which, by the way, is going to be in July 2020, so mark your calendars. It also must be noted that this proposal has taken a few assumptions, namely that the HIAD, the technology that my partner talked to you about, will be completely approved for use by the United States government, and that a space agency will have the necessary budget to undergo all this, expenditure of capital for the necessary mission profile. Well, of course, all of these can change in the next few years, but technically, and in a technical way, all of this is already possible and can be done in 2020, July 2020. So unless something political or some technical difficulties arise, this can be done as soon as 2020. And that would be it. Well, actually, no. Just as a little parenthesis, it must be noted that human risk, that a mission to Mars has a lot of risks. So when designing a mission or a proposal like this, it must be important to put human safety first before budget. So yes, that's why it's a little bit of more expensive. That's it. And here's some references if you'd like to read them. And finally, thank you for your attention.
Muchas gracias por su atención. Ahora vamos a presentar los 3 videos de los 3 equipos, que es para cada video 3 minutos, y ya va a continuación la evaluación de los equipos. Muchas gracias.
¿Qué medida por el cuadro? Es un pedo.
¿Dónde está?
Perdón. Si las cosas fallan en la Tierra también hay unas más, pero ya tenemos el audio. Entonces, nada más denos chance para que se pague bien. Bueno, denos chance a ver.
Our mission proposal, which consists of 3 steps. The first one is getting everything set up before the actual trip starts. We build the space station in low orbit and then we launch it to Mars trajectory. Our space station, the Mars Transport Station, takes astronauts.
Y este equipo es Earth to Mars. Ahí va.
Advanced student from Instituto Politécnico Nacional. Our name is to Mars Station, and we decided to participate in the technical challenge in which we describe a proposal to be able to travel and live on Mars using technologies existing today. Our project is a mission proposal which consists of 3 steps. The first one is getting everything set up before the actual trip to Mars. We build a space station in low orbit and then we launch it in Mars trajectory. Our space station, the Mars Transport Station, takes astronauts to Mars. It has 2 main modules and 1 bridge that can rotate. This rotation is going to help the astronauts to feel gravity line force downward. This can help their bone density to keep as it is. The spaceship is divided in 3 sections. The first one is an instruments and fuel storage module, where fuel for the ionic thruster is stored, and also there are instruments prepared for controlling the ship. And as you can see in front of the spacecraft, there is the solar wind sail, which will help the ionic thrusters to impulse the spaceship to Mars. Everything in less than 6 months. Now, the artificial gravity rotational hallway is designed to not only be a control deck for the space controls, but to be a place where astronauts can relax or do more exercise to maintain their bodies fit. The 2 hatches available, as you can see in the diagram, are designed to have up to 2 crew vehicles. These crew vehicles, airplane-like design, can re-enter the atmosphere and land using rockets, like the technology SpaceX developed for future missions. This is really helpful for Mars because the atmosphere is so thin, it is almost inexistent. This is important for deceleration because there is no drag to stop the ship from crashing into the ground. So, by using rockets to propel itself up again, it can decelerate in a higher rate and do an extra soft landing, as you can see in this video.
On the way to Mars, they will be able to set up the app, which will be verified for the duration of the mission. They will be powered by a nuclear reactor.
The hub will come with new inflatable modes, which will be cultivated. This is where the crew will be able to grow the crops in order to have food. The hub will come with 3 campuses, which will be used in order to live as they need, may be for in research or a mission on the red line surface. Another advantage for the Plato system is the capability of connecting to other apps in the future. Finally, they will come with a main area. This is where their crew will be able to live and make their research. Once the mission is finished on Mars surface, the crew vehicle is capable of taking off to Mars, and once they reach their destination on Earth's orbit, the mission is complete. Thank you.
Ahora vamos a ver el video de Martian Safe House.
Hi, I'm Luis Carlos, I'm the London David Castellana, Andrea González.
I am Keselin Gomez.
Hello, my name is Julio Pablo.
And I am Keselin Gomez. And we are Space.
Hi, I'm Luis Carlos, I'm the London David Castellana, Andrea González, representing the Martian Safe House program. We are aerospace engineers students at UPAE Puebla, Mexico, which was the first challenge that consisted of technical aspects of where to live and arrive to Mars. We decided to focus on the radiation that astronauts would be exposed to the Martian surface. As you know, Mars does not have an atmosphere, which means that astronauts would be exposed to great amounts of solar and cosmic radiation. The solution is to build a habitat that shields them from radiation. The problem with that is that we will need to bring many materials and thus requiring more fuel in our trip to the planet. Therefore, our proposal is to use mainly Martian raw matter. The plan is to build a geodesic dome with a radius of 20 meters made of 70 centimeters of marso containing between 2 layers of PIP, polyether ether ketone. PIP is a polyether that has excellent radiation and thermal insulation. Inside this dome, we would have water filtration systems and hydroponic methods for growing crops that will also help filter the air. To obtain oxygen, we will extract from a rock named almanite. This rock is composed by oxygen, titanium, and iron. If we mix it with hydrogen and heat the mixture to 600 degrees Celsius, we obtain water vapor, and with electrolysis, we can separate the molecules of hydrogen and oxygen.
So, how the hell will we do it? Martian soil is the main protection against solar and cosmic radiation, and plants will be designed to build a structure by 70 centimeters of Martian soil containing between 2 layers of 10 centimeters thickness made of granite. In this drawing, we can see how radiation is blocked by the structure and also how it helps to keep the temperature inside the dome. Now, let's hear from me.
Great explanation, Andre. Now, as you can see, the dome is almost here. In this cross section and roof, we can see the dimensions of the habitat. We have a radius of 20 meters long. Therefore, we have a height of 20 meters and a total length of 40 meters. Now, Andre explained the dome will be built with triangle prisms. We have 6 different triangle prisms. Now, this will help us to form a perfect geodesic dome. First, we will build the interior layer of bed. Then, on top, we will place the compacted Martian soil in form of triangle prisms. And finally, we will place another layer of bed. As we can see, we will need the film of a brain that will be in the ship to finish the geodesic dome.
We hope that this project will help in the first human missions to Mars, so that astronauts can have better conditions while habiting on the planet.
Hello, my name is Julio Pablo.
And I am Keselin Gomez. And we are Spacebox.
Space technology has come a long way in the past 50 years. Nevertheless, there are still many challenges we need to overcome.
What we have sent and landed a spacecraft from Mars is to get complicated when we added humans to the equation.
Take, for example, mass. The largest payload we've ever landed at Mars was 2012's Curiosity rover, weighing 907 kilograms, far less than what a manned mission would weigh if we consider supplies, equipment, and habitation among other requirements.
Current launching technology can deliver payloads of more than 100 tons to low Earth orbit, but the number decreases dramatically to farm trouble, so we have to develop new launch systems.
Even if we could launch an enormous amount of mass, current experimental anaerobic descent and landing systems such as the low-density supersonic accelerator only enable us to land up to 3 tons of mass.
That's why we come up with a different approach. Instead of sending all the payload in a single launch, we propose splitting the load into different launches across several launch grids. The first launch will send out from Mars a sat vehicle, or MAV, with empty tanks. Another launch will send cargo-based models with supplies and equipment. The MAV will land on Mars and begin field prediction through in-situ research utilization, and the models will be recaptured into circular orbit around Mars.
Once in orbit, these cargo modules will maneuver to get close to each other. Through the use of an inertial measurement unit, they will locate their position and an algorithm will dictate microthruster maneuvers so they can stabilize, align, and finally assemble through the use of automated clamps, establishing a modular orbiting station.
In the next launch period, an return vehicle or ERV will be launched. In a subsequent launch, a manned spacecraft will be sent out. Additionally, a third launch may be sent transport shuttle, but this depends entirely on the needs of the mission.
The ERV will later capture into a circular orbit around Mars, and the manned spacecraft will land on the Martian surface. At the request of the group, the orbiting station will release 3-ton cargo base, which will deploy a hypersonic inflatable aerodynamic decelerator and undergo atmospheric entry, having the capability of eventually landing the entire payload through the use of current EDL technology.
If the transport shuttle was launched, it can be loaded with scientific payload and launched to the orbiting station to be picked up later, really increasing the amount of scientific payload that can be returned to Earth.
Finally, at the end of the mission, the MAV will take the crew to the orbit where they'll rendezvous with the ERV and be on their way home.
This proposal enables the mission to Mars with current technology, and the orbiting station stands as the first step for colonization and is aid for further missions.
Space Fox thanks you for watching this video.
Muchas gracias. Ahora los jueces van a deliberar sobre los resultados en unos de 15 a 20 minutos, lo que pueden tener un descanso de este tiempo y al regreso vamos a hacer una mesa de debate con los equipos participantes y el equipo aquí de la UP para después continuar con la premiación y decir los equipos ganadores. Gracias. 6:30 rompemos.
Aquí se cuenta si un 7.
Chochi, ¿van a dejar sus cosas?
Son muy buenos, la verdad. Son buenos, estamos hablando de chicos de universidades. O sea, no estamos hablando con maestros, no estamos hablando con otros. Y sin embargo, están todos mencionando trabajos y ideas muy buenas. Eso es más relevante.
¿Recibió una qué?
Es un buen programa para mí, es la salud. Pero también incluye la pérdida de desechos. Entonces, hay un factor que nos ha tocado que es, nosotros somos criaturas de necesitamos gravedad de nuestro corazón, no sabe, la presión sanguínea lo reciente estado de condiciones como esta época gravedad de y estando en un planeta que tiene un tercio de la gravedad de la Tierra, vamos a salir.
La verdad está muy difícil. El reto es ese reto de la humanidad. No está hecho para pero pues por interesante de la capacidad humana dar una solución para llevar a
Haces condiciones psicológicas porque no puedes salir a caminar a Marte como lo haces aquí en Tierra por el simple hecho de que sales y todo el aire que tienes en tu cuerpo se te va a salir por la presión atmosférica que existe. O sea, tenemos que vivir en clausurados. Y una persona como yo puedo vivir semanas, meses encerrado en casa de una persona normal, vamos a llamarle así. Entonces, pues, tiene que agregarse, digo, o sea, no solo tener pacientes y acá es como vivir una cárcel nada más que no se den cuenta. Sí. Que no se den todos ellos entonces ahora claro que la luna son condiciones aún más adversas. Yo creo que más bien podría ser un campo de entrenamiento de la luna para, digo, pues unas cuantas semanas, unos cuantos meses, y ya pues en Marte pues no van a estar unos cuantos meses, van a estar años ahí.
Es que más importante es como preparar a estar y darle
estamos hablando de una generación muy diferente a lo que vivimos hoy y conocemos. Pero algo que es científicamente comprobado
La salsa. Yo ya tengo temas, vamos a ver esos comparativos. El nivel más alto es Marcel House. Y yo tengo a Space. Yo también así. Yo los puedo si quieres. No voy a salir ninguna. Ahorita vamos a hablar una. Ay, sí, porque la verdad yo no he comido desde. No, ahorita mismo es sola. Hay pero muchísimas gracias aquí abajo, pero bien. Sí. Yo creo que más esto sería la votación de si quieren ir al baño, no tengo ganas, pero es como sea por la pues ahorita claro, eso me gusta mucho. ¿Y esto se va a sacar? Sí, el evento de misiones espaciales se hace cada año, pero cada año cambia de importancia. Y la bueno, yo estuve presente, no lo conocí como. Sí,
Pero para historia tienes como diferentes. Bueno, no necesariamente, pero es diferente para estudiar. Tú tienes visión y lo que tenías para ver. Yo también, o sea, la misma duda. Aparte de el niño que estaba trabajando que le gustaba a mí también y ya yo como, o sea, que yo hice los exámenes y nada, y ya veo de qué depende. O sea, ¿tienes como uno? Bueno, por ejemplo, no, tipo acá también. Y siempre. Y no sabe nada de ninguna, o sea, sí, pero que está bien, ya Yo lo veo.
Ayer había una.
¿Una pluma, señor? ¿Pluma? No, me diste una, ¿va? Ahí hay una.
Les dijeron a cada equipo que era una persona.
Ah, no. ¿Les comunico?
Jóvenes. Bueno, ya vamos a comenzar. Gracias. Bueno, vamos a terminar el evento. Muchas gracias por quedarse. Pero bueno, ya vamos para terminar. Antes de terminar, tenemos un pequeño panel de 20 minutos con los equipos y con alumnos de la UP de Ingeniería. Entonces, el objetivo es nada más que hagamos un poco de discusión acerca de sus propuestas que vieron en los videos y en las presentaciones, ¿no? Entonces, muy bueno. Dejo para moderar el panel.
Bueno, antes que nada, agradecerles a todos ustedes por su esfuerzo, ¿no? Porque realmente nosotros pudimos ver el esfuerzo que cada quien puso a sus trabajos. Y pues simplemente queríamos pues, felicitarlos también por su esfuerzo extra, ¿no? También sabemos que es un proyecto no es curricular, también es extracurricular. Y bueno, simplemente notamos algunas cuestiones, unas preguntas que estamos seguros que todos los miembros de la audiencia tuvieron también en sus cabezas y las vamos a poner en la mesa para discusión. Ustedes también han de haber tenido dudas respecto del trabajo de los otros compañeros. Y bueno, vamos a empezar con la primera pregunta.
La primera pregunta que tenemos es un poco para Earth to Mars Mission y para Mars Safe House. Los dos tienen un poco una habitación para las personas que habitan allí. Entonces, ¿cómo plantearon el problema de las tormentas de arena en Marte, que es un problema muy importante a considerar? ¿Y cómo es que su solución resuelve ese problema?
Bueno, lo que nosotros propusimos es es usar el domo geodésico. La ventaja que tiene el domo geodésico es que es muy estable estructuralmente, ¿no? Entonces no representaría ningún peligro para los que están viviendo dentro de este domo las tormentas de arena. En todo caso podría presentar tal vez un problema para la generación de energía, que la gran mayoría es a base de energía solar, ¿no? Pero puede ser resuelto de otras formas.
Bueno, en nuestro caso, en lugar de plantear usar paneles solares por la cuestión de que se ensucian y no contamos con que vaya alguien que los limpie, en este caso, habiendo transpiración, es posible, pero consideramos que va a ser como un trabajo desperdiciado en lo que podrían estar haciendo experimentos. Por lo tanto, al usar el RTG, el Radioisotope Thermoelectric Generator, aseguramos que haya siempre electricidad, y para evitar que estructuralmente tengamos problemas, lo decidimos hacer circular y que tenga no completamente un domo, pero sí una capa, bueno, un tejado más bien un poco inclinado para que resbale todo el cuerpo.
Luego, la siguiente pregunta es específicamente para Earth to Mars Mission, respecto a la estación espacial que planean construir en la órbita de Io. ¿Cuál es la ventaja adicional que tiene tener una estación específicamente en Io y no hacer estas pruebas aquí en Tierra, simulando todas las estaciones que tiene Io?
Bueno, la estación espacial en sí es una idea, de hecho es por eso que se llama Mars Transportation Station. Está diseñada para transportar, puede ser utilizada para que se requiera hacer más misiones, se puede dejar en la órbita, tanto de Marte como la de la Tierra. Es por eso que para armarla en el espacio es necesario, más bien es necesario armarla en el espacio precisamente para evitar intentar mandar toda la nave, porque es muy grande. Más o menos tiene alrededor de 50 metros de largo y unos 38 metros de diámetro.
Lo que consideramos en esta parte es que igual construir una estación espacial en Io requiere de más trabajo, de más viajes espaciales. Entonces, por eso queríamos ver cuál era justamente el beneficio adicional.
Bueno, considerando como los problemas que hay fisiológicos, estuvimos planteando esto porque al tener un módulo rotativo de 19 metros de radio, tiene las capacidades de simular la gravedad de la Tierra, casi sin tener como afectaciones de mareos o así. O sea, según cálculos y estudios que se han realizado anteriormente y un algoritmo que ya está comprobado, se puede definir como un radio específico que tenga estabilidad, tanto de orientación para los astronautas, no pierdan como hacia dónde van por estar dando vueltas, como de atracción como tal. Y además el tamaño de la carga permite mandar más materiales a Marte y tener como mejores opciones de vida para todos los días que va a tardar el viaje.
Sí, igual para Earth to Mars, todos aquí estamos familiarizados un poco con el concepto de CubeSat y la forma en la que los mecanismos mediante los cuales mantienen la actitud de la aeronave estando en el espacio, ¿no? Y una de esas formas son precisamente los volantes de inercia. No sé si recuerdan que son simplemente discos que giran y por conservación de momento angular redirigen la nave, ¿no? Y mencionaron que su estación tenía una especie de caminadora, ¿no? En el que...
Sí, el módulo rotativo.
Exactamente, entonces, es una pregunta, ¿no? Y quizás a discutir entre ustedes, compañeros, ¿cómo contrarrestarías esa prueba, ese volante de inercia gigantesco, ¿no? Que estaría básicamente cambiando la actitud de tu estación espacial, y si eso no afectaría, por ejemplo, tu consumo de energía, o básicamente, ¿cómo lo contrarrestas, ¿no?
Bueno, nosotros quisimos poner en el centro precisamente para evitar como cambios de dirección. Entonces, los dos módulos cuentan con unos propulsores de alrededor de 10 centímetros, que son los que se usan para acomodar las naves hoy en día. Estos tienen que ser capaces tanto de posicionar los módulos para conectarse como para evitar que esté rotando, como que se desvíe del curso. El hecho de que esté rotando la nave completa junto con junto con la rueda, no implica tanto problema porque solo me estaría dando un poco de atracción gravitacional artificial dentro de los módulos, los cuales nada se usan para dormir y alimentarse.
Digamos, respecto a tu eje longitudinal de lo que es la estación espacial, ¿no importa entonces la orientación de la estación espacial en sí?
No. Lo único que realmente podría afectar sería la vela solar, pero esta puede estar rotando, siempre y cuando se mantenga el curso.
Esta es una pregunta un poco más específica para Spacehawks. La forma de alinearse es usando un hilo. Sabemos por todos los estudios que se han hecho en el planeta que después de un tiempo estos suelen tener una falla y suelen hacer imprecisos. Entonces, ¿cómo planean contrarrestar o cómo planean complementar la medición del IMU para lograr una alineación, por decirlo perfecta? En el caso de que no sea perfecta, o hay una ligera variación.
Sí, por lo mismo, para grandes rasgos, ya en cuestión de una órbita más grande, usamos solamente el IMU, pero como mencionamos anteriormente, una vez que los módulos ya estén suficientemente cerca, también empleamos un sistema de visión computacional, el cual complementa las lecturas del IMU. Pues de igual manera, por lo mismo que existe una comunicación entre los módulos, no nada más estamos, no nada más están tomando lecturas externas de los IMUs, en donde, no sé, en un centro de control ahí se toman las decisiones, no, o sea, el algoritmo está interno en el módulo, entonces el módulo tiene la capacidad de tomar sus propias decisiones, es como que, ok, bueno, ¿sabes qué? Voy a confiar un poco más en mi sistema de visión computacional una vez que esté cerca, el IMU me puede de gran ayuda, pero más que nada cuando está lo suficientemente lejos. Entonces, por lo mismo, o sea, cuando vimos ahí en la demostración del prototipo, no solamente es que esté acomodado en el plano YZ, sino que también tiene que estar en un plano bidimensional.
Y bueno, también nos gustaría contar con el apoyo del ingeniero Morales respecto a poder transportar el hidrógeno para la construcción de justo estos domos que utilizan el hidrógeno en las casas para obtener oxígeno. Entonces, ¿qué tan riesgoso sería transportar el hidrógeno en una misión de esta clase y manipularlo una vez ya estando en Marte?
No me esperaba esa intervención de esta manera, pero bueno, como sabemos, el hidrógeno es un gas bastante volátil, es muy explosivo, y pues y también no solamente es eso, sino también tiene el alto riesgo de combinarse con otros elementos, en particular con oxígeno y con carbono, que son los elementos, hidrógeno, carbono y oxígeno son los elementos orgánicos, vamos a llamarles así. Entonces, tiene que meterse el gas hidrógeno en canisters, vamos a llamarle así, bastante protegidos para evitar cualquier tipo de fuga de gas, que no se contamine con otros elementos y pues, como se mencionaba en todos los foros e incluso aquí mismo, la vida humana es lo más importante. Así que ese es el principal factor que se tiene que contemplar a la hora de transportar el hidrógeno. De hecho, se puede decir que el hidrógeno tiene un factor de elevación mayor que el helio, y sin embargo ocupamos el helio para inflar globos meteorológicos, inclusive, ¿cómo se llama? Blimps, aerodirigibles. Ocupamos el helio porque, pues, por lo mismo, la tragedia de Hindenburg surgió a través del hidrógeno, no del helio ni del gas caliente, sino es por la volatilidad del mismo hidrógeno.
O sea, sería seguro llevar hidrógeno en un cohete, ¿no?
Es riesgoso, pero se puede minimizar los riesgos si se toman las precauciones necesarias.
¿Puedo contestar a eso? Digo, o sea, sí, definitivamente es riesgoso, ¿no? Pero como, o sea, es obvio que se tendrían que tomar las medidas necesarias para evitar que haya un riesgo hacia los tripulantes, ¿no? Por ejemplo, el transbordador espacial utilizaba hidrógeno para sus motores y pues no es que explotara el hidrógeno que traía el transbordador espacial, ¿no? Los accidentes por el transbordador espacial están relacionados con las causas. Es muy claro que se puede mantener en un ambiente controlado.
Sí, bueno, relativo al domo geodésico, tenía una pregunta más bien de índole geométrica. Por la forma en la que describen cómo se construye el domo, básicamente tendríamos dos domos, ¿no? Uno que, pues, digamos, la que sujeta, la parte interna, digamos, después una capa de tierra marciana y otro domo que cubre todas estas partes, ¿no?
Correcto.
Digamos, si lo ves en dos dimensiones, en sándwich es muy fácil, ¿no? Pero las complicaciones de índole constructivas, es decir, cómo se articula cada una de estas piezas, o si los triángulos tendrían que crecer en el domo de afuera. No sé si me estoy dando a entender.
Sí, en el caso de este domo que calculamos, que es de 5 metros de radio, la diferencia no aumenta tanto entre la primera sección y la segunda sección, por lo mismo, porque son 5 metros de radio y nada más tenemos en total 70 centímetros de espesor, ¿no? Entonces no cambian tanto las dimensiones, por lo tanto nada más sería una pequeña diferencia entre los triángulos de Beck de la sección interior a los de la sección exterior. Y sí, la tierra compactada los triángulos de tierra compactada sí se abrirían un poco hacia arriba, pero nada más.
70 centímetros.
No, 70 centímetros en total, son 50 centímetros de tierra, 10 de PEC y 10 de PEC.
Medio, bastantes datos. Y aún así calcularon que...
Sí, no, hicimos los cálculos y sí, el domo se podía sostener por sí mismo, inclusive soportar vientos y tener, en caso de haber una tormenta de arena, que aguantara la arena que se acumula en la parte superior.
Y digo, nada más por curiosidad de los espectadores, yo creo, ¿cuántos triángulos tenía ese domo? Es casi una esfera, ¿no?
Sí, tiene 6 tipos de triángulos diferentes, pero no recuerdo la cantidad de triángulos.
Exactamente son 250 triángulos.
250 triángulos por cada domo.
Sí, que el domo al final es media esfera, ¿no? Pues es una esfera cortada a la mitad de segundo
Una pregunta igual enfocada a los proyectos que incluyen domos es la durabilidad, ¿no? En el primero se incluye un inflable, por decirlo así. ¿Qué tan viable y durable es esta solución? Porque al final es una misión a Marte, es un costo muy grande y mucho trabajo. ¿Cuánto tiempo podemos probar que en una atmósfera como Marte va a durar algo así? En el caso igual, ¿cómo podemos saber que la Tierra marciana en esas condiciones con la atmósfera se va a comportar como queremos y cómo va a durar? Y en caso de que no dure, ¿cómo se puede solucionar esto, ¿no?
Bueno, nuestro concepto del hub está inspirado en dos proyectos realizados por la Universidad Politécnica de California y la Universidad de Michigan. Ambos usaban una capa exterior inflable. Esto permite expandir el volumen del domo por varias razones. Y en nuestro caso decidimos implementar 2 laboratorios, uno de cada lado, precisamente por si uno llega a fallar, se puede tanto desinflar como desacoplar para evitar como que haya fugas o problemas posteriores. Pero en teoría, según se ha planteado en ambos proyectos de las universidades, el uso de algunas sustancias podría permitir la mayor durabilidad dentro del domo, además de una estructura metálica interna.
Hablando del tiempo.
Pues calculan alrededor de 2 a 5 años, entonces tiene algo.
Sí, la razón por la cual escogimos el PEC como el plástico para construir el domo es porque tiene alta resistencia a la radiación, ¿no? Y al desgaste, lo cual nos permite tener una mayor vida útil del domo. La ventaja que tiene el domo geodésico es que la Tierra por sí sola prácticamente se podría detener, ¿no? Todas las fuerzas que genera el peso de la Tierra se detienen por sí mismo. Entonces, en caso de que haya desgaste alguna sección de PEG, es muy sencillo poder reemplazarlo por una nueva, ¿no? También tenemos una vida útil alrededor de 3 a 5 años, pues es cada cuando más o menos las misiones a Marte se deberían hacer, ¿no? Que es cada 2 años que se encuentran las órbitas para poder mandar la misión.
Sí, bueno, estableciendo como un punto de comparación entre From Earth to Mars y Space Force, ambos proponían una especie de dividir, podemos decir, dividir el proyecto en segmentos y pasarlo a Mars en el espacio. Y de hecho me parece que el sistema de alineamiento aplicaría incluso también para From Earth to Mars. ¿Cómo mi pregunta es cómo propondrían que pudieran llegar a una solución en conjunto, ¿no? Es decir, ustedes en concreto proponían armarlo en la órbita de Marte, ¿no? Ustedes en la órbita de la Tierra, y después mandar para allá toda la estación. No sé qué ventajas ven el uno y el otro, no sé si podrían un poco hablar sobre esa idea.
Bueno, una ventaja que me encontré como muy relevante es para la construcción de la unidad gravitacional, que es un poco más complicada que unir los módulos que eso ya se ha hecho antes, por ejemplo, en la Estación Espacial Internacional o incluso para el Skylab. El hecho de juntar las 3 partes y que ambas queden, bueno, en este caso las 4, y que todas queden como perfectamente alineadas, es muy importante, sobre todo porque va a estar moviéndose. Y utilizar un sistema como el que ellos desarrollaron podría ayudar a facilitar tanto la alineación para que sea más precisa como para ahorrar combustible.
Y sí, bueno, sí, claro que existe una comparativa. De hecho, nos enteramos que ellos primero en estos años curiosos aplicar 2 estaciones espaciales como los finalistas. Pero aquí yo creo que la mejor ventaja que tendría nuestro proyecto sería la celeridad con la cual se puede implementar, ya que de empezar la construcción de una estación espacial en LEO, pues tendríamos que primero terminarla antes de poder pues esperar a que las órbitas se alineen y posteriormente mandar. Pero nuevamente, si la prioridad no es llegar a Marte lo antes posible, claro que se puede armar con nuestro algoritmo, se podría aplicar su idea. Eso si el tiempo no es una urgencia.
Tengo una última pregunta para ustedes, es un tema que ahorita estamos escuchando mucho. La aeroespacial es la basura espacial, ¿no? ¿Cómo consideran este problema su solución y cómo lo plantearon en algún momento para llegar a esa solución? ¿Y qué opinan acerca de este
tema? Bueno, la problemática que nos planteamos nosotros al crear nuestro proyecto fue proteger a los astronautas de la radiación, ¿no? Y cómo disminuir el uso de combustible, ¿no? Y bueno, al final del día dinero, ¿no? Que se gasta. Entonces podríamos ver que esto podría ayudar a la disminución de la basura espacial, ya que tenemos que utilizar menos naves para llevar material, ¿no? En cambio, si tuviéramos que construir un hábitat solo con materiales que traemos de la Tierra, pues necesitaríamos utilizar naves más grandes, que por lo tanto se queda la primera etapa, no sé, en órbita o algo que podría generar más basura, ¿no? Entonces, creo que nuestro proyecto podría ayudar un poco a reducir la basura espacial.
Bueno, en nuestro proyecto planteamos el uso de cohetes reutilizables no solamente para reducir costos de lanzamiento, sino también para evitar que se quede basura espacial. También la basura espacial que se encuentra actualmente alrededor de la Tierra representa un problema menor a nuestra consideración debido al tamaño de nuestra nave y al espesor que estamos calculando. Es alrededor de 25 centímetros. A diferencia de que tiene la Estación Espacial Internacional. También está la consideración de la ubicación en la cual se debería construir para precisamente evitar todos estos escombros. Y para el tiempo en el que se va a realizar, ya la Tierra va a tener muchos satélites capaces de como rastrear esta basura o incluso recogerla.
Pero yo creo que también enfocado a evitar la basura espacial es como dentro de sus proyectos no generar más basura espacial.
Sí, dentro de nuestro proyecto comprendemos también como una de las limitantes que si bien por cuestiones de tiempo no la incluimos dentro de la presentación, que pues sí, o sea, representa más viajes, representa pues, más dinero y más basura que esto se genera. Sin embargo, dentro de nuestras propuestas de aplicación terrestre, todavía no la incluimos porque no la despleguemos al 100%. Sin embargo, se consideró y se empezó a desarrollar un sistema que a través del algoritmo de acoplamiento y el sistema de visión computacional activamente se recojan pues, los escombros en órbita y que se mantengan dentro del módulo de carga y que después se recoja ese módulo y así se pueda realizar.
Pues muchas gracias, eso sería todo por nuestra parte y pues mucha suerte.
Prueba, necesitamos unos minutos más para deliberar, pero pues, bueno, todos los asistentes ya se pueden retirar. Si necesitan lo de la escuela práctica básica, está Pablo Zavala afuera. Pues vayan uno por uno, nada más que les ponga la asistencia. Gracias.
Ah, sí, cómpranos para esto.
Si empiezan la planita, y luego una semana roja.
No, eso no vale.
Mi papá tiene frutos exóticos. Tal vez mi papá no paga. Sí. Ah, sí, sin problema. Sí. Ah, perfectísimo, por ahí.
Bueno, ya vamos a proceder con los reconocimientos.